Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Question 1 by Mitadru. Reference Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verse 10. The translation reads, at the time of death, with steady mind and devotion, united by the power of yoga, and only by fixing the prana, life breath, perfectly in the middle of the two eyebrows, he reaches the supreme resplendent being. Question. Does fixing the prana perfectly in the middle of the two eyebrows have any philosophical meaning apart from being part of a meditation procedure?
Yes, it is. It has a meaning. It's not. It's not to be taken literally. So, see, if you read the verse carefully, he's talking here about meditation, right? Now, meditation is the time, the state just before enlightenment. So, obviously, here even death doesn't refer to physical death, it refers to the death of the ego, the last trace of individuality. Because what separates us from the Atman, the self, is nothing but this sense of I. And from this sense of I comes these desires, egocentric desires. That's the whole impediment. So, we're taking one verse, chapter 8, verse 10. Now, you have to understand what he's been saying for hundreds of verses before that, right? This is where people go wrong. They just pick up verses at random. I'm not saying you. If you take it literally, they try and take it literally. Now, what do you mean at the time of death? That they'll conveniently forget. That I want to live, but I still want to do this. So, the death refers to the death of the ego. In the Upanishads also they use it often. Prayanta Kale, the end of time. It means the end of experience, the end of the ego, which keeps you in this world, not physical death. So, what is that state? Steady mind and devotion, united by the power of yoga. So, there's a constant, steady fixation of thought on the self, nothing else. And fixing the prana perfectly in the middle of the two eyebrows. Now, if you take it literally, fix the breath between the two eyebrows. I can only fix it in my nose. I don't know how to, and my lungs. Now, how it goes the eyebrows, I don't know. So fixing, it means fixing your gaze, little tilted slightly upwards, because when you tilt little upwards, it generates a feeling of devotion. Devotion is nothing but love. But the difference between love and devotion is devotion flows from the lower to the higher. You'll say, I love my pet, I love my family, but you'll say, I'm devoted to God, I'm devoted to a guru. So, whenever there's a higher object, you will use devotion. It's the same emotion. So, that's what it means. Having an attitude of devotion humility, that there's still an I, there's something far greater to be achieved. And you are hell bent, if that's a word to be used, on removing this ego, death to this individuality. Where is that and where are we? Nothing more precious than this literally lifeless, useless piece of flesh. Actually, nothing more useless, but it's so dear to you. You believe you are this. And once there are extensions of this, which is your children, forget it. That I becomes so fixated that you cannot see anything. It's not your fault. It's just ignorance. So where is the time of death? So obviously these are not literally, these are all very, very specific usage. And those days they understood this. So he just talks it as a matter of fact. When people those days, they understood what the spiritual parlance was. So you need to really break it down. You got it? Next.
Question 2 by Anil Ji. Reference Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 verse 17. The translation reads, to him who is regulated in eating and recreation, regulated in action, who is regulated in sleeping and waking, yoga becomes the destroyer of sorrow. Question. In the e-learning lecture, Swamiji says, regulation plus effort equals progress. To regulate any aspect of life is an effort. So how is it saying that regulation plus effort equals progress?
So your question is, the e-learning lecture, it is mentioned you have to regulate with effort, or regulation plus effort is progress, but any regulation requires effort, right? So what is the significance of saying these two things together? See, to regulate any aspect of life is effort, but completed. Answer the question. That's the questioner is saying. To regulate any aspect of life needs effort. That I would go along with. But how are you putting effort? But
if you make the effort, it's a progress.
If you make effort, it's a progress. I can talk about how much effort you made in life. There is no progress. Effort means what?
Is it for your personal thing or is it
Effort, is it personal? No, even a person who puts in effort for personal, it requires a lot of regulation. Could be personal also. They will progress in their field. A tennis player puts in a lot of effort and he's regulating it. He will progress, even though it's selfish.
And putting the effort in the right direction.
Right, that's what he said, right direction. That's not relevant.
The consistency of the effort.
Consistency. That's what is regulation and effort. See, now this is where you must be precise in your thinking. Regulation with effort is progress. If you put in effort and regulate, but every effort is not regulation. See, you can have effort and be totally unregulated, obsessed with the effort. See, a guy is what is this startup? 18-hour days I work. They very proudly they talk like that. There's no regulation. So sooner or later they collapse. All tablets, ICU. This is the reason. Regulation requires effort, but effort may not be regulated. That's where you're going wrong. Whoever asked the question, Anilji. So what he's saying, regulation you have to put in effort. To grow spiritually, all the effort you put in must be regulated. I'm studying, going mad studying. Intellect needs a break. I've told you all, don't study more than an hour at a time. Not more than an hour in a day, in fact. Hour, 15 minutes. You can't do more. Regulation. That's what he says. He who is regulated in eating, even recreation, he's saying it's okay. You want to relax. You need that. But that also should be regulated. Now you told me to relax. I watched 3 movies last night. Whole day now I can't work. Right? You have to regulate even your watching. No, you got to stop it because you got to work tomorrow. He who is regulated in eating, recreation, action, sleeping, waking. You can't be awake too long. You can't be asleep too long. Must be perfect regulation. Then yoga becomes the destroyer of sorrow. So right effort, first of all, that itself is a big question mark. Even what you do needs to be regulated. How much karma, how much action, how much devotion, how much knowledge, how much relaxation, how much exercise, how much talking, going on blabbering just because your mouth has been given to blabber. Ask one question, you got to wait for 5 minutes to listen. No regulation in talking. Most people can't regulate their talking. Very rare. It talks only as much as is required. See, like a person will call. A reason I'm calling. Okay, understood. So your reason you're calling, that's good enough. And when they end the conversation, so the reason I had called was this. Why do you repeat that? Now I can't tell them because nobody is disciplined. They'll they'll give you the reason they called before the call. In the middle, somewhere they'll put it in, and in the end also. They must be repeating the order, no? Before, during. You got to painfully hear, mad fellow. You got the order, no? Can't stop talking. Regulation. So, why it's difficult? It requires intellect. How much to write in a text message? Either you'll write too much or too little. Because you really don't care about the other person. You care what you want to talk. If you look at it in terms of how is a person who doesn't know who I'm trying to communicate to, how will they understand? Becomes totally different. So everything needs intellect. That's what he's saying. Only then yoga means the spiritual practice will destroy your sorrow. Otherwise, sorrow means desires, agitation. It will remain the same. You can't do it. It's a good question. A slight issue. Regulation needs effort. But effort may not be regulated. You all understand? It's actually the truth. People who put in effort, they don't know how to regulate. So it's all disproportionate. Business, they are interested. Business, go on and they won't relax enough till they collapse. Exercise, obsession, OCD, till they collapse. See, your muscles need rest. They need to regenerate. So you have to, even if you're interested in exercise, you have to regulate it with rest. And people who rest, they can't move only after resting. You told me to rest, but what about moving after it? So again, not regulated. They're in a state of perpetual rest. You only said intense work is rest. Ramatirtha said.
Question 3 by Anilji. Reference Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 verse 29. The translation reads, united to the self by yoga, he sees the self in all beings and all beings in the self. He sees the same everywhere. Question, what does it mean by all beings in the self?
See, it is actually poetry. It means the same thing, but it's not just said for the sake of poetry. He sees the self reflected in all beings. So, what is the subtle connotation is when your focus is on the self, you will see that self reflected everywhere, right? The self is an all pervading reality. It's the underlying substratum. It's like wherever you see waves, you recognize there's an ocean. Wherever you see an ocean, you know there are waves. It's like that. So, when the person's focus shifts, all of us are not all the time thinking of the self. If you're thinking of the self, whatever you see is a reflection of the self, all beings. But when your focus shifts to beings, you've lost focus on the self. You need to bring it back. All beings are nothing but the self. So that's the subtle implication here. When your thought is on the self, you see all beings reflected in it. And when your focus shifts to individual beings, you immediately bring it back. No, they are nothing but the self. That's why in Indian culture you have a reminder, like right on the forehead, there's a bindi, there's a tilak, right? Why? As soon as you see a person, you don't get swayed by the individuality. You don't get caught up in your personal likes and dislikes about that person. Immediately you know, that's a reminder, that person is the self. This is just an expression. It's supposed to be that, a reminder. That's why you wear it on your forehead. So whenever your focus shifts to individual beings, that person has come. I can't stand. Then sit. You can't stand that person. So no. Even that person is the self. So that's the implication. Even if your focus shifts away, you bring it back. Focus is on the self, you will automatically see reflected. In fact, throughout the scriptures, they mention this. That this is the test of spirituality. You don't see differences. Person is black or white, or rich or poor, Indian, American, Hindu, Muslim, nothing, no divisions, no demarcations. It's all just the one self. Where is that and where is the world? Everything you want to divide and hate. Thousands of years ago, they said, without seeing the same self everywhere, you cannot get to the Supreme. That's the precondition for any spiritual growth. Any hatred, you're out. Yes, Jayu?
Hariam Gautamji. So, when you see other people and you try and tell yourself that everybody is a part of self, and somehow you get to that point where you say, okay, they're behaving according to the nature, they're still Brahman. But how do you do that to other things, like the physical things that you have in this world?
No, you cannot do it even to beings. Forget physical. You should not try. This is meant for people in a high state. When you don't have desires, you will see everything as the self. It is desires which create these differences. I am attached only to my family, so you see them as different than everybody else.
Right.
So how can you say you're in a soccer field, you're seeing your grandson play soccer. I'm seeing all the children the same. Let me see them all. You cannot. Don't try all that. It's not possible. When you lose attachment to that particular person, you will see everybody the same. So you have to work on removing your selfish desires. That should be the focus. So devotion is an effect. The sameness is an effect. It cannot be practiced. So what you can practice, like you said, is this feeling that whenever you find some resistance or hatred, you can analyze. Yes, that person is functioning helplessly according to their vasanas, like I am. So you will feel sympathetic towards all. In that sense, you can practice that equality. You can't directly see the self, but you can practice a equal vision. So what if a person is evolved? They have put in the effort. They're functioning according to their past effort. Person is a criminal. They didn't get the right education and guidance. So you feel one with all beings. That way, that you can practice. You should practice. Now, objects, how can you practice? This remote is the same as the food on my table. Therefore, I should eat the remote. Each thing has its own place, right? Again, it's an effect. Yes, Umesh, you had something?
So how?
Gautamji, it is
Sorry,
follow-
let Jayu finish. Sorry. Jayu?
No, so I was trying to understand, how do these people actually see others? Do they see them differently, or do they actually see them as individuals as we see them, but just can
No, they
tolerate?
see as like how you see a person sees waves. They see a big wave, they see a small wave, they see a frothy wave, they see a plain wave. The evolved person sees it all as water. The form and name has no meaning, has no particular significance to that person. They're all nothing but water, right? So you recognize that there is a unifying reality in and through the diverse. Of course, you see all the different beings. It's not that your eyes have become different. So otherwise, there will be problem. You see somebody else's husband as your husband. What will happen, Jayu? What to do? I am a person of equal vision. You will be in the jail. What she said?
I said I'll see him as Brahman only. so
Brahman.
I don't-
I know what Brahman you see and what. Umesh.
Okay, Gautamji, as an extension of the discussion that just occurred, there is a person that is behaving in an obnoxious way, and I'm supposed to think he's according to his vasana, and therefore I should not be hating that person.
Yes.
But I am working according to my vasana. So what's wrong with me hating that person?
Nothing wrong. You hate the person hates you, and life goes on.
It's okay not to like somebody.
No. See, the reason you are not liking is because your desire is being obstructed. So when you say obnoxious means what? You have a desire for that person to behave in a pleasing manner. He's a rude, arrogant, obnoxious fellow, right? So your desire is being obstructed. So you can continue that way, but you will be a disturbed person. That's all. Because your desire is being obstructed, you're disturbed by that person's behavior. If you want to reach a state where you are not disturbed, where you're peaceful, regardless of others' behavior, this is the way to do it. Now you say, no, I'd love to remain agitated because everybody in this world is obnoxious. I hate them. Of course, you can remain. No problem with that.
That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is it's okay to somebody who's behaving that way. It says, okay, they are behaving, and I walk away from that person, turn my back towards them, say, I'm not agitated, I'm okay.
No. Now that's different. You said, I don't like their behavior. which means you are disturbed. But if you are peaceful, you understand they are functioning helplessly, you can take whatever steps you need to. You don't have to go and hang around obnoxious people. So you can tell them in the party or whatever, you shut up, you this thing or whatever. Your fellow is being obnoxious. I know how you will behave, which is fine. Point is, we are talking about achieving a state where, regardless of the person's behavior, you are calm. Now, I'm not talking about what you should or should not do. You don't have to go and consciously hang around people you find their behavior, whatever, obnoxious or whatever you call it. But why should you be disturbed? That is their nature. So you got to work on remaining peaceful within. And that's how you do it. By understanding it is your personal desires that are being obstructed. So how do I rise above them? Work on that. Whether a person is obnoxious or doing something completely to your liking, feeling should be the same. You are peaceful. Samatvam yoga uchyate, that evenness of mind. That's why that word samam, that equanimity, that evenness is to be achieved. You achieve 100% evenness, you're enlightened. Nothing can bother you. Yes, the person's behavior is, there are so many people who are hurting others, doing all kinds of things. Why should you be disturbed? You can take whatever action you have to take. That's a different matter altogether. You must remain perfectly calm. Yes, Meena.
Gautamji, just an extension of that one. Say somebody is like being obnoxious or whatever, and you're saying that it's because they're obstructing your desire. Most humans' automatic reaction is to react to that kind of behavior. Because I guess it's directly affecting your ego.
Right.
Okay. So what do you suggest about not reacting? Like, how do you control that reaction?
See, like I've always told you, it depends upon how strong your intellect is at that point. Suppose you have a weak intellect, you will not be able to control your reaction. So everybody has a point beyond which they can't keep quiet, right? So it's like that. So you can take an insult. Ego means somebody is putting you down up to 20%. That's what your intellect can handle. You can keep yourself quiet up to that. Beyond that, if it goes, you'll blurt out. You'll start fighting with that person. And that's what happens. So what can you do? If you know that you are weak in an area and that person is going to provoke you, you try and be away from that situation, which provokes you, because you will lose your composure and make a mess out of it. That's the temporary way to do it until you are strong enough to control yourself.
Okay.
So like people tell me, I'm really improved since I've come for I said, how do you say that? He said, before, one sentence from my wife was enough to start fighting. Now it takes about 4-5 minutes. Only then we start. I said, that's a big improvement. 5 seconds to 5 minutes. Fantastic. But after 5 minutes, then I can't. But now at least we don't hit each other. It's come to verbal abuse only, not hitting him. So that's a big step too. So So there are people who moved homes also. They're 20 miles away, but it goes on over the phone. Still. 20 miles away, they moved homes, separate homes, but still too attached, talking all the time. And but at least physically they are safe. Good. Arati, you got a problem? Such a sweet fellow. What is the problem you have with him? What do you shut off your video for?
No, sorry. I don't know what's happening.
Anyway, go ahead.
So, Gautamji, you talked about the first part of this. Then how is he sees all beings in the self? How does that translate to how an enlightened person sees the world?
See, when you talk of enlightenment, obviously that is a state which doesn't apply to us, right? He's talking in our language, more in terms of how we need to get there. An enlightened person is already recognizing the self everywhere, right? So anything, things and beings are just a reflection of that. It's like a person, we are seeing a mirage in the desert, he's seeing sand. He doesn't see a mirage. He sees only sand everywhere, right? We are seeing a mirage, an oasis, and we have said, look, understand, this is nothing but sand. You're looking at pots, all kinds of form and shape, and the masters are saying, look, it's nothing but mud. But they are seeing mud. They don't see names and forms. They see it's just mud everywhere. We don't see. So that's the connotation there. It's that equality of vision that will get you to the self. So of course it's a high state. That's what I was telling Jayu. How we need to start with is, we can't practice that. But how we can see equality there everywhere is to understand every person is a helpless victim of their nature. So there's no difference between anybody. So you see a person acting obnoxious, as somebody said. They have not had the right education, environment, upbringing. They're acting like that. If you had their background, upbringing, company, maybe they've had in their life, maybe you would have acted like that. What's the big difference between you and them? That's the flavor there. You get it? Jen?
Hi, Gautamji. So you were talking about how when you have a strong intellect, you won't get affected when you're around people who bother you. And you would keep quiet. So is there any situations where having a strong intellect would lead you to actually saying something?
Of course. Strong intellect means, see, you must understand, what I was trying to explain to Umesh. If you lose your composure, if you're agitated or disturbed by a situation, you will not know how to handle that situation maturely, right? So having an intellect doesn't mean you don't do anything. It means your mind is calm. So you're able to think what ought to be done in that situation. It could mean fighting. It's not just keeping quiet. Like Shakespeare says, beware of entrance into a quarrel, but being in it, make sure thy opponent bewares of thee. Now a person is acting maliciously towards your organization or company. You've tried all the means to resolve it, but they are not agreeing. Sue them, take them to court and go all out, right? So you don't have to be quiet in that situation. So whether you should be quiet, whether you should react, whether you should take aggressive steps, all that should come from the intellect. But people are agitated, disturbed. and then they function. They start talking impulsively, angrily, and the whole situation blows out of control.
Yeah, I was referring more to like the casual conversations, like you come across an obnoxious person or someone who just doesn't, or you don't like what that person is saying or how that person is acting. If those situations would ever warrant you saying something as a display of a strong intellect.
Of course, it could be. Why not?
Okay.
Suppose you decide that the person should know that you don't appreciate this, so you don't have to deal with that person again, right? You should make it known to them if it is required. Okay. Look, this kind of conversation I will not be a party to. You're welcome to talk about it, but not in my presence. You should. Suppose a person is maliciously gossiping and you don't want to be a party to it, and you don't want them to come with that kind of talk to you in the future, and you feel that's important. Why not? But most people try and tell the person to try and correct them. That is the problem. Now that is not going to work. Nobody, unless a person asks for your advice, directly or indirectly, there's no point. You may be right. It's not going to only lead to more argument and more friction, right?
Right.
Could be your partner. Suppose they have a viewpoint which is different from yours. What's your problem? Just because you're married to them means they should have the same opinion as you? Let them have a different opinion. The problem is when you want to impose. Very, very subtle thing it is. It's my husband. Therefore, obviously they should think how I think. Who fixed that? How are you a custodian of another person's conscience just because you're married to them? Or your children. Just because they're children, they should think like you think? So that's the problem. But if you're objective, where's the problem? You will meet it as it's supposed to be met.
Got it. Thank you.
Casual conversations, you must understand as a default rule, Jen. Everybody is trying to push their opinion on the other person. That's why it gets heated. When you're in that situation, that's why default state is keep quiet. Can you talk one thing sensible? Why would you talk? I know a person, they're married to a person, not one thing is sensible. I've never heard anything sensible out of there. Literally, I'm telling you. And then they say, why are they talking? I was trying to explain. And then I had said this, and then, who's mad now? I don't know. So best stop talking, no? Especially the extended. After years and decades, they've understood. Best is to not talk. Taken them decades. That is the level of intellect. Next. Oh, we're still on Anilji.
Question 4 by Anilji. Reference Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 verse 28. Translation reads, thus constantly practicing union with the self, the yogi, freed from sin, easily attains the infinite bliss of contact with Brahman. Question. In the e-learning lecture, in the explanation, sin is when you regret an action that you're committing. In other places, all agitations are sin. Then why specify that when you regret, that is sin? Please explain.
Because regret is one type of sin. See, sin, you're right, it means mental agitation. So when he says yogi freed from sin, doesn't mean freed from regret. Freed from all mental agitation. So regret is the type of mental agitation. It is a severe type of agitation where you believe something is right and you go against that. So it pricks you. It's not regular sin. It's not regular. See, regular agitation is, I really like French fries today, and you couldn't have it. You're agitated. French fries. You're agitated. Now, that is not the same thing as going against your conscience. In the sense, can you equate the same thing? You were at work and you did a wrong transaction, accounting wise, you did a fraud, and your conscience is pricking you. My God, how could I have done something like that? I swindled that person. You are mentally highly disturbed because you went against what you think is right. So it's a very specific connotation when you say regret or guilt, because you have done what you believe is not right. Now, eating French fries is also agitation. You can't equate the two. So he's specifying. All of us are in sin philosophically because all of us have desires. But at least don't make it worse by going against your own conscience. Then you are really crossing the boundaries that you have set for yourself. Never do that. You can get completely torn apart with that guilt. Why do you want to do something which you believe is wrong? You see the difference? But both are sin. Philosophically, anything against the Atman is sin. Finished. Why it is sin is Atman, the self. Your real self is the state of infinite bliss. What is opposed to bliss and happiness? Sorrow. So anything sorrow is opposed to the self, is sin. So if you are in sorrow, you are sinning. Philosophically, finished. You're not in the real state you should be in. So that way all of us are in sin. Actually, you may be a millionaire, billionaire, you are in complete sin, full desires. But that doesn't mean you're a person who's gone against their conscience and doing things you should not be doing. Right? That's different.
Question 5 by Anilji. Question: what is in the thought of the self that gives peace? One understands any thought that is extrovert gives agitations since it's a desire.
It's not what is in the thought of the self that gives peace. It is the freedom from the agitation that gives the peace. So, what gives sorrow, you must understand. Sorrow comes by definition out of that ego. That if I get that, I'll be happy. You understand? Selfishness. So when you feel a lack of something, that is what is sorrow. That is the agitation. So when your thought is on the Atman, the self is beyond your body, mind, intellect. You can't lack anything. You understand? It's a purely an intellectual concept that there's something beyond the world. So it is free from that sorrow of I. It's that I which creates sorrow. If I get that, means if I acquire that for myself, I'll be happy. Very subtle thought. So, in fact, what is peace? Peace is nothing, or happiness is nothing but absence of sorrow. I've told you, right? Person has a craving for a cigarette. We give that example so often. His mind is agitated. The minute he smokes the cigarette, what happens? That agitation, that desire for the cigarette is temporarily gone. Actually, that's what happened. It's not the cigarette. It's that agitation in the mind which is gone, which he calls peace. Oh, I'm so peaceful. Now he doesn't understand, again it comes back. So the secret to peace is to keep your thought on something beyond your selfishness. That's why even Forget self. Even if you're genuinely unselfish, you'll be peaceful. In fact, that's the way to be peaceful. Not to think of yourself. That's what the whole Shastras are saying. You can stop thinking of yourself, me and mine, immediately you'll be peaceful. Problem is, from the day you're born, your whole concept of happiness is to cater to me and mine. You can't even conceive this. Just place your thought on something above your selfishness. My body, my mind, my ego. You can place your thought somewhere, you'll be peaceful. Right? In other words, service. Forget self. Even if you can put it on serving others. So you're not thinking of yourself. That's the idea. You will be in a heaven. That is heaven, in fact. That's what Kabira says, right? Ram bulawa bhejiyo, diyo Kabira roye. Jo sukh sadhu sant mein, wo vaikunth na hoye. Just God called me to heaven and I started crying. Because the bliss which is in being a saint is far greater than any heaven. Vaikuntha is it. What is Vaikuntha? So it's a way of saying even the greatest heaven in worldly indulgence. What is that? All rubbish. Because their thoughts are still on enjoyment. They're selfish. That's what he means. Can never be satisfied.
Question 6 by Anilji. Reference Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 23. Translation reads, "Let that be known as the yoga or severance from the union with pain. That yoga should be practiced with determination and with an undespairing mind." Question: why is that yoga should be practiced with determination and an undespairing mind?
Now, before we get to that, see that first line. That is exactly what I was saying. Let that be known as the yoga. In fact, it's off, not or. Let that means the spiritual practice be known as the yoga of severance from the union with pain. Dukkha sanyoga viyogam. If you read the Sanskrit, there's even more. Gives them even more of a punch. Dukkha means sorrow. Sanyoga, union. Viyoga, severance. That is called as the severance from the union with pain. So in other words, right now you're united with pain because you're one with the body, mind, intellect. First of all, that we don't understand because you're totally neutralized, acclimatized to pain. The minute you have a body, there's pain. Constant hunger and thirst. The minute there's a mind, there's pain. Constant desires being generated every moment. Ego is pain. Somebody hurt me, somebody praised me. Constant status, power. So the spiritual path is you are cut off from that union. Means your thought are on something else. So you're free from this pain. That's what I was explaining, right? It's not that that thought is creating the bliss. Because you're in a thought where you're not in pain. Pain is this. So if you can put your thought on something beyond pain, that itself is bliss. Self is what? We don't know the self. You're actually just putting your mind on a concept beyond the world. The world is pain. That's what actually is happening. Of course, only the intellect can do that. You have to understand what you're doing. You can't just simply put your thought. So people try. It won't work. So what your question is, why should you practice with determination and undespairing mind? So determination, of course, you understand that you need to have that determination because the mind will constantly pull you back into the world. So determination is the most important thing. I must grow. An undespairing mind, because you don't see the results. You don't know the self. You don't know what is self-development. And you know what the world is. So in the beginning stages, you will despair. I'm giving up what I know. And I'm trying to achieve something I don't know. Obviously, there'll be agitation. So the Shastras try and tell us, Shraddhasvatat. He says, have patience, my dear. Have patience. Because it's initial. Once you start understanding and growing, you yourself will feel the conviction. You yourself will feel the bliss that things don't bother you. That itself will give you conviction to go further. Come from your own experience. So don't worry. Just wait. You know this is the right path. You know what you're doing in the world is not going to give you satisfaction. You have no choice. You have to keep going. So keep going. And none of you have the problem because you've not left anything. Where you go? What are you doing? Stayed in your house, family, everything you have. What are you leaving? Simply some concepts you're learning. We had to leave everything. This applies to us. Undespair. You have to do it. And trust something. I don't know how it happened. So it's meant for those kind of seekers. You want despair. You're back home to your husband, your children, your career. So there's nothing to despair. Just keep studying. You got everything anyway. Just keep studying, keep growing. That much you can do. If you had to leave something, then I can understand why you ask. So when a person decides to take it up and give up the comfort of the known, obviously there will be despair. All seekers had to go through that. But they had to push through that initial phase. Otherwise you can't do it. That's why nobody does it. So you just go with your determination. No, this is it. Neti, neti. Not this. The world can't be it. I can't be living for just this family and my money, and there has to be more to life than just this. I'm not saying you give it up, but you have that determination. You won't compromise. So don't worry. Despair all you want. What difference does it make? It's there, no, everything. At least what you need to do should be done with determination. Also, for all of you, at least, yes, that much conviction should be there. I need to get up in the morning. I need to be more unselfish. At least don't compromise on these basic disciplines. Even that will give you despair, but that much you can easily do. Right? So we have time for one more question if somebody has before we. One or two, I think. 5 minutes, right? Anyone? Yes, Umesh.
Okay. I've asked this question in many different ways to you, so I'm asking in one more different way.
A different way.
So there is a space which is three-dimensional, time is the fourth dimension, causation is the fifth dimension. This is the terrestrial world, but there are vasanas which are beyond the terrestrial world. So where do they exist? They have to exist somewhere for them to manifest themselves into terrestrial world.
See, again, the fallacy in the question is they have to exist somewhere. Existence is matter. Somewhere is space. Again, you brought in the world. Vasana is beyond the world. Vasana is ignorance of the self. Right? It doesn't exist anywhere. Where, how, when is all world. Vasana is that which causes the world. It's beyond the world. It's beyond time-space causation. So don't use time-space causation to understand Vasana or self. So the closest we get to understanding Vasanas is the state of deep sleep. See, in deep sleep there is, if you really analyze, what is it? It is a state of total nothingness with reference to the world. Suppose I ask you to describe to me deep sleep, what will you say? It's just a gap between two worlds. I was awake, I'm sleeping. Between that, there was deep sleep. There's not really an explanation because you don't know what it is. But if you analyze, the whole personality of yours is in that nothingness. That's the fascinating part. So, you were Umesh before you slept. You are Umesh after you've woken up. Umesh has, let's say, 1,000 desires. You have a desire for your family, you have a desire for travel, you have a desire for X, Y, whatever. Where is all those desires, thoughts, feelings? They have all gone into a state of nothingness. So we can only project up to that point. It is a complete blankness and nothingness, but it contains everything of mind. Amazing.
Okay, Gautamji, but in that nothingness, in a deep sleep, when I wake up, I'm still Umesh. But in case of Vasana, when I wake up, I'm somebody entirely different because I have reborn.
No. When you're talking about death and birth now?
Yeah, it's the same thing. The
Vasanas are the same. Even Umesh, the desires are the same. Only the body is different. Body is a further creation of desire. That's why I told you even that day, right? That exactly the same desires and intellect carry forward. The same thought, the same desire, the same quality of thinking. Only the body changes. So it's the same thing. Vasana, mind, intellect carry forward. When death, only the body drops off. Everything else is exactly as it is. Now you all get confused because the memory doesn't go. Memory is just a part of the mind which dissolves every day it dissolves. Suppose you had a car accident, argument's sake, and you forgot that you are Umesh, and it was in a different state. So fortunately, unfortunately, even Meenal wasn't there. So actually now you don't know. He's praying for that day to come. Actually, you don't know who you are. Imagine. You don't know who you are. Your wallet has gone in that accident, and you don't have any clue who your family is. You don't know where you live. You just imagine it happens sometimes. But you are exactly that same person. Desires are all there. It's just the recollection of your past experiences has gone. But it's the same person. So birth is exactly the same thing. So you may not remember what degree you have. But if you apply yourself with that intellect, you will get back the same information very quickly. So only way to understand it is to understand a state situation where the memory is lost. That's exactly what happens. Except the memory is lost and the body is different. So don't worry, Umesh. Vasana is exactly where they are. You're hoping at least 2-3 will go in the middle. Next time, at least start without some of it, all this nonsense. Nothing.
I'm trying to see where they're floating around.
Yeah, I know. They're all there. I'll tell you what they all are. Don't worry. Quite obvious. Zoe, you can email your question. We'll take it up next week. Actually, next week there's no Q&A because I'm traveling for a couple of days for a talk. But so any questions, we'll take it up in 2 weeks. Otherwise, anything related to the text, we can take it up on the weekend also. We'll see you on Saturday. Hari Om.